So, do you remember when we were going to give up handshakes? I mean, about a year or so ago, Dr. Fauci came out and said that the pandemic would essentially be the end of handshakes. And on some level, that makes sense to me. I get it. It's always seemed like sort of a weird tradition that we have in the US. Not everybody around the world does it. It's always sort of an awkward thing that we put on people when we travel other places or that when they come here more often. And I was kind of on board with that. I got it. I mean, the last year, because of all of our, the being separated and the pandemic, we got really used to fist bumps or elbow bumps or whatever it was, right? We made it work. We adapted, and that seemed to work fine. And so I thought we were past handshakes. And then a couple weeks ago, my grandfather passed away. And he had lived a long, marvelous, full life. He was almost 99 years old. And so we traveled, of course, my family and I, up for a celebration of life ceremony with my family and my grandmother, who is still living. And, the weekend was full of gatherings with my, extended family, many of whom I hadn't seen in 18 months or longer. And it was wonderful. It was wonderful to be together with all of them. But interestingly, like almost as soon as we showed up at the first event, like within moments of being there, one of my relatives puts out their hand, to shake hands. And I instinctively just grabbed it. And I'm not going to lie, it actually felt pretty good, right? That moment of human touch and connection felt really good. Spent most of the weekend shaking hands with family members or well-wishers, and there was lots of hugs too. I don't want you to think we weren't hugging. We were lots of hugging going on too, but the handshake, there are lots of handshakes, and so I don't know where I'm at on handshakes at the moment. I'm not sure if I'm pro-handshake or anti-handshake, or I'm not sure what we should do. We probably should stop shaking hands in the interest of public health, but that's a conversation for another day. The reason I bring this up is because the experience got me thinking, or at least it sort of brought very starkly to my attention how easy it is going to be for us to fall immediately back into habits that we had or routines that we had pre-pandemic. Despite the fact that it's been 12 or 14 months, it's very easy. Like that, I went right back into grabbing hands to shake hands, and I had some sort of at least semi-intention around not doing it. And so I think this is a wake-up call that at least it was for me, and I kind of want to share this with you and see if you're having the same experience, or maybe send up a warning signal before you do, or a warning flag, is that if we don't use this moment to get really intentional about how we want to emerge from this pandemic, either professionally or personally or anything in between, some combination, it's going to be really easy to fall right back into those old ways of being and old ways of working that, let's be honest, I mean, not all of it was working well. Some of it was, some of it wasn't. So, I have personally been reflecting over the last several days, the last couple weeks now, about what are the things in my life, in my work, that I want to get back to, right? Things that I haven't been able to do. Things like, meeting with people in person, or having, meeting people locally that I haven't seen in a long time for a happy hour in a bar, right? Haven't been able to do that in a long time. Or, hosting parties here at our pool, bringing our friends together. We haven't done that in a long time. Or things like I just did actually today. I went back to Orange Theory for my first group fitness. I'm fully vaccinated and I felt comfortable to go back, and I think it nearly killed me, but I was delighted to be there. I was so excited to be back at Orange Theory again. And so, there are things that I wanted to get back to, things I missed, things that added real value. But then there's the other side of it, right? There's those things that we used to do that I know I certainly don't want to get back to. I'm not sure about handshakes, right? I'm conflicted on that right now, but I know for a fact that I don't want to sort of default to traveling just because, right? I don't want to be traveling as much. I like my family. I want to be with my family. I've loved having all of this time. I haven't been on an airplane in, close to 15 months now, and it's actually been sort of wonderful. And so if I'm going to go back to traveling, I'm going to do it with intention and clarity. I also want to make sure that I stay very intentional about the time that I spend with my family, and that we preserve things like the family hikes that we started doing during the pandemic, like some amazing, awesome hikes that we did together, and it was great. And I want to continue to do that. And so I think here's the reason for the video. Here's the reason, or my message for you today, or sort of call to action is to really be thoughtful right now about how you want to come out of this, how you want to emerge from this pandemic experience into your life and your work post-pandemic. Whether whether you're reflecting on this at a personal level, or whether you're reflecting on this as a leader of teams or a leader of organizations, I think there's some questions that we need to consider. And there's 3 questions I think help you with this reflection or with this work, and you can do it individually or with a team. But I think the 3 questions that we need to be thinking about are, number 1, what kinds of things did we really miss from before? What kinds of things have we felt like have been big takeaways or big gaps that we can bring back? We want to know what those things are so that we can return to those things, maybe even return to them in a more thoughtful and intentional way. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, what kinds of things were we doing before this experience that don't make sense, that we didn't like, that we hated before, that we want to make sure we avoid coming out of this? And this is, regardless of whether your team distributed and went to remote work, or whether you're working in an environment where work just had to change due to safety protocols or distancing, what kinds of things do we want to avoid? There's a lot of meetings we used to have that were unnecessary. Maybe we can skip those. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of policies that we put on people around, when and where and how they worked that didn't make a lot of sense. They were based on the wrong kind of decision making that probably we should try to avoid, right? There's probably a whole list of those things. We need to identify those things now so we can get out ahead of it and make sure that we don't end up just letting that sneak back in, right? Those things reach out their hand and we just grab it and shake its hand, right, without thinking. So we need to be very careful. And then the third question, which is I think the one that's holds the biggest promise and is probably the most interesting, is what have we learned over the last 14 months that we can use to create a better path forward, that we can use to, live with or work with greater intention as we move forward. This is kind of the how do we make lemonade out of these lemons that we've been juggling. And I think there's a lot there, right? There's a lot of things we've learned about well-being and about how and when and where we work, about how we want to live our life, how we want to connect with people, how intentional we want to be in our relationships. There's a whole load of things that we've learned that we don't want to lose track of. So, think about those 3 things, reflect on those 3 things, and I would love to hear from you. What kinds of things are you going to grab onto? What kinds of things are you going to let go? Drop me a comment below. What's bubbling up for you? I'd love to hear from you, and I will see you next time. Take care.